Every structure has a load-bearing point, the place where, if you remove it cleanly and without warning, everything above it comes down. My father found mine on a Thursday in November and removed it at the dinner table while the gravy was still warm. My name is John Brown. I am 45 years old. I am a structural engineer. I own Reed & Brown Engineering, LLC on the West Broad Street corridor in Richmond, Virginia, and we design and inspect bridges and infrastructure across the state. I am good at my job. I am good at it because I spent 20 years learning that the difference between a structure that holds and a structure that fails is almost never visible until the moment it matters. The flaw is always there. You just have to know how to look. I did not know how to look at my own family. Let me tell you about Garrett. Garrett Brown is my twin brother. We were born 11 minutes apart in October 1979 at a hospital in Henrico County, Virginia. Garrett first, which he mentioned throughout our entire childhood with the frequency and satisfaction of someone who considered this a genuine accomplishment. We went to Virginia Tech together in 1997. I studied structural engineering. Garrett studied business administration, which seemed appropriate because Garrett was always better at the management of perception than the construction of anything real. We graduated in 2001. I went to work at Brown Construction, our father's company in Henrico County. Garrett went too. I ran the engineering work, the designs, the inspections, the submissions that won contracts. Garrett ran the relationships and the office. In a family business with one designated heir, the person doing the technical work is always one decision away from being invisible. I worked there for 14 years. In 2015, at 35, I left. Not dramatically, not in a fight, but with the quiet certainty of a man who understands that his skills outgrew the space available to them. I went independent. By 2018, I had a solid reputation for VDOT infrastructure work across the Richmond corridor, and a name worth something in this market. Garrett stayed. Of course he did. Brown Construction was his inheritance, and he had always known it. My father is Donald Brown. He is 70 years old and founded Brown Construction in 1981. Solid reputation in the Henrico County market for 40 years. He built something real and spent 2 decades ensuring it would survive him in the form he preferred. In Garrett's hands. He was never cruel about it, simply consistent. Garrett was the one who would stay, and Donald had oriented everything around that fact from the beginning. He was not wrong that I would leave. He was wrong about what it would cost him. I met Sarah in 2016. She was 24 years old and working as a project coordinator for a Henrico County development firm. Sharp, funny, with the particular quality of someone who asked better questions than most people twice her age. We dated for 3 years. By 2019, I had a ring in my desk drawer, a vintage platinum setting with a cushion-cut diamond that I had chosen carefully and paid for in cash, and had been carrying the intention of for 6 months. I had a date in mind. A restaurant on East Carey Street in Richmond's Shockoe Bottom neighborhood. A speech that I had never written down because I did not think it needed to be written down. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about several things in 2019. COVID arrived in March 2020 and rearranged everyone's geography. Brown Construction shifted to skeleton crews. Sarah's firm went remote. The world contracted to whoever was already in your house. I was in my apartment in the Fan District. Sarah was in the Short Pump area of Henrico County, 10 minutes from Garrett's house, and 10 minutes from the Brown Construction offices, where Garrett showed up every day because Donald believed presence mattered, even during a pandemic. Proximity is its own kind of opportunity. 28 miles during a lockdown is a different distance than it used to be. In April 2020, Sarah told me she needed space. She was stressed, she said. The situation was a lot. She needed room to think. I gave her room. I believed her because 3 years with a person builds a particular kind of trust, and I had not yet learned the thing I was about to learn, that the most expensive thing you can do is extend trust to someone who has stopped earning it. By June, I understood the relationship was over. Not in an explicit conversation, just the accumulated weight of distance, shorter calls, responses that arrived later each week, until they stopped arriving. I grieved it. I kept working. I kept the ring in the drawer because I did not know what to do with it, and somehow putting it away felt like conceding something I was not ready to concede. I did not know about Garrett, not then, I did not know yet that the space she had needed was 10 minutes away in a half-staffed office. November 2020. Thanksgiving. I drove across the Mayo Bridge over the James River on a Thursday morning. The old bridge, the one that connects downtown Richmond to Manchester, that has been a crossing point on this river for longer than the city has been a city. 28 miles to my father's house in Henrico County. The day was cold and gray, the river flat below. I was bringing a pie from a bakery on West Main Street because Sarah and I had always brought a pie and the habit had not adjusted to the new circumstances yet. I arrived at the house at noon. Donald's second wife, Margaret, answered the door. She has been in the picture since 2008 and is a decent person who has spent 16 years navigating the specific difficulty of being the stepmother of two men who do not agree on anything. She took the pie. She did not meet my eyes, I noted that without processing it. The dining room was set for 5. I counted the chairs. Donald, Margaret, me, and 2 more. I heard Garrett's voice underneath it. A woman's voice. Familiar. I walked to the kitchen doorway. Sarah was standing at the counter helping Margaret with the rolls. She looked up when I walked in. For one long second, the room was entirely still. Then Garrett put his arm around her shoulders and looked at me with the expression of a man who has rehearsed this moment and found that the rehearsal did not fully prepare him for the real thing. We sat down at the table. Margaret put the food out. Donald poured the wine. Everything moved with the deliberate normalcy of a meal that everyone at the table, except me, had been preparing for. Then Donald raised his glass. To Garrett and Sarah. Donald looked directly across the table at me with the steady gaze of a man who has made a decision and intends to see it through. On their engagement, Garrett was not looking at me. Sarah was not looking at me. Margaret was looking at her plate. I looked at my father. He held my gaze. He did not blink. I set my glass down on the table. I folded my napkin. I placed it beside my plate with the precision of a man who is using the small physical actions available to him to maintain the composure he has decided he is going to maintain. Congratulations, I said. Then I stood up, pushed my chair in, and walked to the front door. I took my coat from the hook. I went to my truck. I drove back across the Mayo Bridge in the November afternoon with my hands at 9 and 3 and the radio off. I thought about the ring in my desk drawer the whole drive home. I thought about the restaurant on East Carey Street. I thought about the speech I had never written down. And then I thought, structure. What do you do when the foundation fails? You clear the site. You start with what the ground actually is, not what you assumed it would be. And you build something better. That night I turned my phone off. When I turned it on the next morning, there were 23 missed calls. 11 from Donald, 8 from Garrett, 4 from Margaret, 0 from Sarah. The 0 was the only number that told me anything true. I called Danny Cole instead. Danny is 46 years old, runs a civil surveying company in Richmond, and has been my closest friend since we were 19 and engineering students at Virginia Tech, who both thought the structural load calculations were the most interesting part of the curriculum. He picked up on the second ring and listened without interrupting while I said the whole thing out loud for the first time. When I finished, Danny said, "What do you need?" "I need you to help me incorporate a company," I said. A pause. "Today, Monday," I said. "I'll spend today writing the business plan." Reed and Brown Engineering LLC was incorporated in December 2020. The name was Danny's idea. "You need a partner on the letterhead, even if it's just your own name twice," I laughed. Danny Cole has been making me laugh in the middle of difficult things since 1997. Some friendships are structural. They hold weight. I filed the paperwork on a Monday morning. I rented office space on West Broad Street the following week. 2 rooms on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled faintly of coffee from the cafe downstairs, and had windows that looked out over the street in a way that made the city feel present and available. I bought a desk, a drafting table, a decent chair, and a whiteboard. I spent January learning everything I did not know about running a business: the administrative architecture, the licensing requirements, the bonding and insurance thresholds for Virginia Department of Transportation work, the bid submission process for public infrastructure contracts. Virginia's VDOT, the Virginia Department of Transportation, operates a merit-based contract bidding system for infrastructure work. Public procurement in Virginia is governed by the Virginia Public Procurement Act, which requires competitive sealed bidding for contracts above $100,000. Every submission is documented. Every award is auditable. There is no version of this process where a relationship or a family name gives you an edge. You win on your qualifications, your track record, and your bid. Period. I understood this system because I had spent 14 years inside Brown Construction, watching my father navigate it from the construction side. I knew exactly what VDOT evaluators looked for. I knew what distinguished a firm that won contracts from a firm that submitted for them hopefully. And I knew, with the particular certainty of a structural engineer who has spent 2 decades reading the places where things are about to fail, that Brown Construction's infrastructure division had been underperforming on quality metrics for 3 years running, while maintaining its contract position on the strength of existing relationships. Relationships age. Quality metrics don't. I won my first VDOT contract in March 2021, a bridge inspection project on Route 360 in Chesterfield County, $340,000, completed 4 months ahead of schedule. The evaluator's report noted the quality of the documentation and the precision of the structural assessment. I pinned that report to the wall above my desk and left it there. I won 2 more contracts in 2022, each one a little larger, each one adding to a track record that was building itself, quietly and without announcement, into something that would eventually be difficult to ignore. I did not attend Garrett and Sarah's wedding in June 2021. I sent a card with a check inside, enough to be decent, not enough to be generous. I did not hear back. I saw Sarah once at a Brown family gathering in late 2022 that I attended, because Margaret asked me specifically, and Margaret has never done anything to me and does not deserve to be avoided. Sarah came with Garrett. She looked fine, the particular fine of someone who has made a decision and is managing the ongoing reality of having made it. She was wearing a simple gold band on her left hand. I noticed it because I knew what she was not wearing. The ring in my desk drawer, the vintage platinum setting with the cushion-cut diamond, was nothing like a simple gold band. Garrett had not known it existed. Sarah had. She had chosen simpler. She had chosen something that did not remind either of them of what John Brown had already chosen and never got to use. I drove home that evening and sat at my desk for a while. I opened the drawer. I looked at the ring. It was time. Here is the thing I want you to understand about those 3 years. 2021, 2022, 2023. Because this is not a story about waiting for revenge. It is a story about what happens when you take the energy that grief produces and put it somewhere real. I was building every contract, every inspection report, every client relationship, every quarter of financial statements. I was building a firm with the same precision I brought to bridge design, anticipating the load, designing for it, documenting every decision so that if anything was ever questioned, the record would speak for itself. In 2023, my firm was awarded the structural inspection contract for the Mayo Bridge reinforcement project. The Mayo Bridge, the same bridge I had crossed on Thanksgiving morning 2020, with a pie from a bakery on West Main Street, and no idea what was waiting for me at the other end. The VDOT project involved reinforcing the bridge's support structure to extend its service life by 30 years. My team spent 4 months on it. The final report ran to 340 pages and was, if I am allowed a moment of honest assessment, some of the best structural work my firm has ever produced. The bridge holds. I know, because we made sure of it. I didn't know yet what January 2024 was going to bring. I didn't know that the contract I was about to submit for would be the one that explained everything, including things that had happened 4 years earlier that I had not fully understood until I read a set of financial documents that my attorney Carol Morris put in front of me in her office on a Tuesday afternoon in Shockoe Bottom. In January 2024, VDOT issued a rebid notice for a $4.2 million infrastructure engineering contract covering a corridor in Henrico County. It was the same contract Brown Construction had held for a cycle, a significant piece of business, the kind that keeps a company's books stable and its bank relationships intact. I submitted Reed & Brown Engineering's bid on January 31st. In March 2024, we were awarded the contract. I found out about the rest from Carol. The business dispute that followed, Brown Construction challenging the bid evaluation process, brought documents into Carol's possession through discovery. Among them, a memo from Donald to his bank relationship manager dated March 2020, describing the need for Brown Construction to demonstrate stable family management leadership to secure contract renewal financing. March 2020. 1 month before Sarah told me she needed space, I sat in Carol's office in Shockoe Bottom and read it twice. My father had not done this out of cruelty. He had done it out of the most practical possible motive, a bank requirement, a line in a financing memo. He had made a business decision about his son's relationship the way he would make a decision about a subcontractor. He had never once considered what it would cost. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So, thank you. Garrett called on a Thursday afternoon in April 2024. My phone showed his name. The first time I had seen it on an incoming call in 3 years and 4 months. I looked at it for 2 full rings, then I answered. John. His voice was not what I expected, not defensive, not managed. Just tired in the way of someone who has been carrying something for too long and has finally run out of the energy required to keep carrying it. Sarah filed. I know, I said. Danny had told me 2 days before, Richmond is not a large city in the ways that matter between people who know each other. The contract too, Garrett said. We heard you got it. We did. A long silence. Then, I don't know what to say to you, John, about any of it. I don't have a version of this where what I did was okay. I need you to know I'm aware of that. I thought about what I wanted to say. I had 4 years to think about this conversation, and I had thought about it in 100 different ways. Angry versions, generous versions, versions where I said everything, and versions where I said nothing. What I had arrived at, after 4 years, was simpler than any of those. I believe you, I said. And I'm sorry you're going through this. Genuinely. I need... Garrett. My voice was even. I can't help you with this one. Because this is the conversation we should have had in 2020, before the toast, before the wedding, before 3 years of silence. I paused. You didn't call me then. I understand why, but that's the conversation I needed. And we didn't have it. I'm not able to skip back to it now. The silence that followed was long enough that I thought he might have hung up. Is there anything I can do? He said finally. Get a good attorney. I said. Be honest with her in whatever process follows. And when you're ready, really ready, not when you need something, call me. We can start from there. I ended the call. I sat in my office on West Broad Street for a while after. The city moved past the window with its usual indifference to individual difficulty, which is one of the things I have always found useful about cities. Donald called 2 weeks later, May 2024. John. His voice was older than I remembered. The health situation he had been managing quietly for a year had aged him in ways that a phone call makes apparent. I owe you an explanation. I read the memo, Dad. I said. Carol showed me the documents. A silence. Then you know. I know you needed a bank to see stable management, and you decided Garrett getting married was the fastest way to demonstrate it. I know you factored me out of the equation as a variable that was too unpredictable. I paused. What I don't know is whether you thought about what you were actually doing to me. I told myself it would work out. A pause. That you'd land somewhere. I did land. Somewhere. I said. That part worked fine. John? Dad. I'm not going to tell you it was okay, because it wasn't. And I'm not going to tell you I'm done with you, because I'm not. But I need you to sit with what you did without me managing your feelings about it. Can you do that? Another silence. Yes. Quietly. Good. Then let's talk in a month. When you've had some time? I ended that call too. Now I want to say something useful, because what happened to me happens in family businesses every year. When I left Brown Construction, there was no non-compete agreement. Donald assumed family loyalty was sufficient. That assumption is one of the most expensive mistakes a family business makes. A properly drafted non-compete clause would have restricted my ability to bid on VDOT contracts in the same area for a defined period. Without one, I was legally free to compete directly. And I did. Family businesses run on assumptions that people will stay, that blood creates shared interest, that loyalty functions as a legal instrument. None of these hold when circumstances change. Speak to an attorney about the agreements that formalize what your family currently assumes. The conversation is uncomfortable. Its absence is far more expensive. Virginia's public procurement process operates on merit, competitive sealed bidding, documented criteria, auditable awards. No relationship protects a business from a better qualified competitor. Brown Construction lost that contract because their performance metrics had declined for 3 years while mine built. The process recorded what was true. The deepest family cruelty arrives wrapped in practicality. Donald made a business decision that happened to involve his son's relationship. He called it management. My father is 70 years old, dealing with the consequences of a memo written in 2020 to solve a financing problem. It solved the financing problem. It cost him one son's presence in his business, his other son's marriage, and a contract worth 15% of annual revenue. That spreadsheet had some missing rows. In June 2024, I took the engagement ring out of my desk drawer. A vintage platinum setting with a cushion-cut diamond. Still in the box. 5 years in a drawer. I took it to a jeweler on West Broad Street, Schwarzschild Jewelers, which has been doing business in Richmond since 1897. The jeweler assessed it at $4,800, and I sold it that afternoon. I used the money to endow a partial scholarship for a first-generation engineering student at Virginia Tech, my alma mater, the school where I learned to calculate load and failure and the difference between a structure that holds and a structure that only appears to. Danny found out about it somehow. Danny finds out about everything somehow. He called me on a Saturday morning in July, the scholarship. Danny's voice had that particular tone of someone who has figured something out. Virginia Tech, you funded it with the ring. I did. Why? I thought about how to answer that. Because I was going to use it to start something. Because it sat in a drawer for 4 years being useless. Because the best thing you can do with something you were going to give someone who didn't deserve it is give it to someone who does. Because I was going to use it to start something, I said. May as well start something worth starting. Danny was quiet for a moment. Then, you're a strange man, John Brown. I'm a structural engineer, I said. We build things that last. It's the whole job. In August 2024, I drove to Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, 3 hours southwest of Richmond on I-81, through the Blue Ridge foothills, for the scholarship presentation. The recipient was a 20-year-old from Roanoke, studying civil engineering, first in her family to attend a 4-year university. She shook my hand in the financial aid office with the particular seriousness of someone who understands the weight of what she has been given and intends to honor it. I told her to take the load calculations seriously. That they were the most important part. She said she already had. On the drive back to Richmond, I crossed the Mayo Bridge at dusk. The river below going gold in the August light. Downtown Richmond on the north bank, Manchester on the south. The bridge connecting them the way it has for over 100 years through everything the city has been through. My firm's structural assessment is in the VDOT file for this bridge. The recommendations we made in 2023 are in its bones. It will hold for 30 more years because we found the places where it was stressed and addressed them before they became failures. That is the whole of engineering. Find the stress. Address it before it fails. Build something that holds. Garrett and I spoke for the first time properly in September, over coffee at a place on Carey Street, which is neutral territory in Richmond and has been since before either of us needed neutral territory. We did not resolve everything. You do not resolve 45 years of twin brother complexity over 1 cup of coffee, but we started. A real start, not a managed one. He asked about the firm. I told him about the Henrico contract. He laughed, not bitterly. Genuinely. Of course you won it. You were always the better engineer. You were always the better businessman, I said. You just made one very bad business decision. He looked at the table for a moment. Yeah, I did. So did Dad. So did I. He meant something different by it. We paid the bill and walked out onto Carey Street in the September afternoon. Richmond moved around us. Old, complicated, rebuilt more than once and better for some of it. Same time next month? Garrett asked. Same time, I said. He walked one way. I walked the other, back to my apartment in the Fan District, and the desk in the corner where a ring used to sit in a drawer. The drawer is empty now. The desk is full of work. I am 45 years old, a structural engineer, and the owner of a firm that holds Virginia Department of Transportation infrastructure contracts worth $6.3 million in aggregate value. I built every dollar of that from a 2-room office on West Broad Street and 4 years of knowing what the ground actually was. My father traded my relationship for a bank memo. My brother married the woman I was going to propose to. Both of them are dealing with the weight of those decisions in ways that are not mine to manage. And I am driving across a bridge that holds because I made sure it would. That is the whole story. And it is enough. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more family-centered accounts like this.